So what you see here running in full screen is essentially Firefox. It's Gecko. It's a thing that makes Firefox work. You don't really suspect it at first. I mean, it's a home screen and it looks nice and it's kind of springy even, and it's got that experience that you expect from a phone with a lot of apps and stuff. But what's actually running here is the web. And so when I just made a phone call from the dialer here, that's a web app. I can call somebody else if I wanted to. Of course, I can also send Jonathan a text message. He actually, he sent me one this morning somewhere. There it is. And he wanted to know whether I could show something off in the keynote. Of course, this being the web on the phone, we also have a browser, and this is also a web app. It's a browser made as a web app. It's weird, I know. It's kind of an inception. Yeah, I heard the word. Deeper. But we have the things that we know and love from the web. We have it too. We have Facebook. This is just the Facebook mobile page that we've sort of wrapped in an app, the same sort of stuff that Shane was just showing, and put on the phone. The nice thing is that all these things that already exist on the phone, they work on the web, they work on this phone. And so, I don't know if you can see here, I actually posted from this phone just a few minutes ago when the Wi-Fi was still working. And I was going to show on stage posting to Facebook, but the Wi-Fi is just hopeless. The point being, though, is that we've made, what Jonathan has been talking about, we've made a phone that already has a million and billions of apps. People have written games for the web that just work instantly, if I had Wi-Fi, that just work instantly on this phone. We didn't have to do anything. We didn't have to go out and promote this thing to tell people to use this or that technology stack that's completely new to them. This is the web they know and love. It's the web that we know and love, and nothing more and nothing less. There'll be much more detail in the afternoon, but as a sort of a final proof that this is actually the web, let me show you the source of this home screen. That's it. Thank you.
Back to the laptop one more time, please. All right. You can help. As Phil said, there are talks today where you can poke at this phone, where you can ask him how to get it onto your phone, for instance. We're figuring it out. Some phones are easier than others, mumble, unlocked bootloaders and stuff like that, but depending on the device you have, you could be able to try it. Certainly you can help, whether you've got a boot-to-Gecko device or not. Isn't that the best transition? All right, so let me talk about Kilimanjaro. It took me 45 minutes to get here, because I had to sort of set up some pieces. But Kilimanjaro is actually a pretty simple concept. It's a project to integrate all of these impossible things. So Kilimanjaro is our name for 4 user stories about how these technologies will work together. So, Jim gets an Android phone and wants to install a New York Times web app, and so he uses the marketplace, but the marketplace login is his persona, right? And then Alice is a web developer who wants to build an app and run it on Fennec and on boot-to-Gecko devices and things like that. 4 stories. They're on a public wiki page. You can ask me for the link afterwards. I put it here, but it's not like you can copy-paste it. Your apps, available everywhere, desktop and mobile. Proprietary platforms and the open web, and all of it tied to an identity you control. That's what Kilimanjaro is. And people tell us it's impossible. We started filing the bugs last week. We're aiming to get most of it done in the next 6 months. If you're a developer, if you're a localizer, if you're a tester, if you're anybody who cares about the web, you can help. 6 impossible things. 1 down, 5 to go. That's it for me. Thank you very much.
So something I need to learn for next MozCamp, not to follow your talk. It's a hard act to follow with all those fantastic demos. So, we okay? Okay, great. What I want to do for the next 30 or so minutes is take a look at engagement, our roadmap for the year, as well as some of the imperatives that we have. And many of you are contributors to the engagement team, so I appreciate either as a Mozilla rep, LATAM work, communications reps, and so on. So thank you. For those of you that aren't, you might wonder, what does this word engagement means? We actually call ourselves engagement versus marketing because we don't do traditional marketing at Mozilla. We never have. Straight from the get-go, we've done something more akin to grassroots marketing and very participatory. And it's all about, for us, building relationships with our users, our contributors, supporters, partners, and so on, so that in turn they can become advocates for us out in the world. And our team consists of creative, communications and PR, contributor engagement, and so on. So I wanted to give you a little bit of context, and I know Gary and Jonathan have already done a great job of this, so I'm not going to really spend a huge amount of time doing this, but as Gary mentioned, with the launch of Firefox 1.0, it was an incredibly different world. It was really a situation of David and Goliath, us against Microsoft. And the stakes were really high, and the odds were against us, and people thought we'd never do it, and we did. And now we've found ourselves victims of our own success. We're now up against Google, Adobe, Apple, and more. I don't even want to name them all. So the stakes are even higher, but it's not unsurmountable, thanks to everyone in this room. And I don't think I need to remind you just how high the stakes are, because everywhere we go, in subway stations, airports, online, we're seeing just how many millions and millions of dollars are being spent on advertisement around the browser. The good thing is it's reaffirming the work we've been doing. The web matters, and people are putting a lot of money behind it to win the hearts and souls of users. So that's good. Bad news is we don't have the money to compete like that and buy traditional and online advertising like our competitors do. So we have to be incredibly scrappy and think differently. That goes back to engagement and building relationships. So as part of this context setting, let's take a look at how we're doing in the marketplace. So in terms of worldwide market share, we're definitely holding our own. As you recall, in 2008, there was a lot of gloom and doom when Google started rolling out Chrome. Industry pundits, the press said, Firefox is dead. I mean, that was a common headline all around the world. But we held on. We fought back, thanks to all of you, again. And then, when you take a look closer at Latin America, you'll see that, unfortunately, market share is declining a bit, but it's not all that bleak, because we're seeing that Firefox usage is growing. And this does coincide with the fact that millions and millions of people are coming online every single day here. If you have a chance, you should talk to Jorge from Guatemala.
My head is too tiny. Wobbling around. Well, I do have some slides, but it does seem like it's been a long morning of talking, and so I'm sort of inclined to start separate from the slides and maybe move into them. What has struck me this morning and what I really want to talk about is leadership. Leadership at Mozilla and growing leaders. And that means all of us, and that means you. One of my goals for Mozilla has always been that we build centers of gravity around the world, communities of people who are leaders in what we're doing. And that's been true at Mozilla since the very early days. I know when I started, as early as 1999 and 2000, I would get up in the morning and I would read what the Polish community had done. And they were a young, aggressive, innovative community in Mozilla, and they did wild and crazy things. Now, and this, you really have to think back. This is sort of before the web. It's not only before Facebook and Twitter, it's before blogs. Literally, it was before blogs. And so just waking up in the morning and finding there was a Polish community was really something, let alone learning that so early on they were much more innovative than those of us in California were in a whole range of things. And many of the things that came out of that world we tried to adopt. And so that kind of try things out, make the world that you want, do new things, is really important to changing the internet. When I sit here and listen, even I feel like, wow, there's a lot of talk that comes about from employees and a lot of what we're doing in California and a lot of you help us, all of which is true, but there's another layer to it which should start, well, probably started before, but if it hasn't, it should start now, and that is real expertise and leadership should be everywhere. It should be distributed. And that's the ultimate goal at Mozilla. We have a mission, I'll talk about that in a moment. But I feel in Silicon Valley, that's one center of gravity. And for me, that's the place where we need to try and thread the needle between Apple and Google and Facebook and all the new technologies that are happening. How do we take the 6 impossibles and figure out a technology and architecture and business path in the middle of all those giants? To me, that Silicon Valley is the right place for that because that's where all those people are. We're like physically in the middle of them. And so what's the technical strategy? Where are they succeeding? Where are they missing? Like that's the information. And so that makes sense to me. But every other form of leadership, what's it like to live on the web? What's working? Does this product make sense? Does this kind of connection make sense? Do we need something else? Where is opportunity? How do we meet the Mozilla mission? That should exist everywhere, in particular not in California. So it should be here. And it should be in Poland, and it should be in Thailand. It should be everywhere. And so the long-term goal is that this first MozCamp here and the things that we do going forward should end up with you telling us what should happen for the technology pieces to meet the needs of life here. And so as I go through what we're working on and what we're thinking about in the Mozilla mission, I hope you'll think of it through the sense of what's important to me, not only what can I do, but what drives me enough to want to lead? Where do I think that I can really do things that you're not hearing about here, or that we haven't thought about, or that we are never going to think about because you've got skills that we don't, and you live in a particular neighborhood or an environment. So please think hard about the world you want and challenge us, all of us, to figure out how can we build it. And the organization of Mozilla has a bunch of resources. It's got some people, it's got employees, it's got some money. Those are all tools to build the world we want to live in. And so when you find things that are really important, really challenge the organization to think, are there resources available that should be used for this purpose? What really can we do? And how do we make even more change? Because there's a product piece about competing with Google or Apple or Facebook or Microsoft or whoever it is, but that's not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal actually is to build a life that's got opportunity and openness and innovation. And so sometimes I think the competitive product piece can become short-sighted. And certainly, for example, when those of us in California, we hear a very different message. We hear from the technology press around us that they don't want to hear about the mission. They're tired of anything that's not about technology and making money and the number of apps. And so we're always trying to filter that out and trying to figure out what's the right path. The mission's important to us. Some people don't want to talk about it. In different parts of the world, it may be really important. And so figuring out, do we lead with product and talk about mission afterwards? Do we lead with mission? Do we lead with other programs that we're developing? What's the right approach to building an open and accessible internet? We will never fully succeed unless we have leaders everywhere. So, with that in mind, I'll jump into the kinds of things that we know that we ought to be doing and invite a conversation. Probably not here because I want to probably keep things short since it's late. But for the rest of the day, if you see me, I'm really interested in hearing what your experience is. I mean, I'm happy to answer questions as well, but mostly I want to hear what your experience is. At Mozilla, of course, we start with the Mozilla mission, about building a part of the internet that is open and accessible. It's a public resource, and it's all about empowering people and putting us at the center of our lives, and about building opportunity. So we have done this forever. You know, people think of Firefox sometimes, but really Firefox is a tool for building the web. And as Jonathan said, we build the web because that's the best tool we're likely to see. Well, certainly in my lifetime. Maybe you'll see another one later on. For building social and economic opportunity for all of us. And at Mozilla, you know, with the browser, we started with the technologies that build the core of the web. And so you can see, you know, we have long history in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And we know a lot how to do those things. In fact, the whole HTML5 system today was founded by the work that Mozilla did in 2003. We started with Opera with HTML5. Maybe not known, but the W3C, you know, the standards body, was unwilling to work on HTML. They refused. And so we had to go off and start a fork in order to actually continue the work on HTML5 with, at the time, Opera representatives. And so that foundation of work that we did years ago sets the stage for our own success now, but also for allowing the web to be a platform and for all of the HTML5 capabilities that have come along. And so the work that we'll do now, that we are doing now, will set the stage many years in the future. So 5, 6, 7 years from now, we may not be that boot to gecko as we understand it today will be the product in 7 or 8 or 10 years from now, but the work we're doing in creating those products has a long-term impact. Like when we started on HTML5 thinking about the browser, it was before Web 2.0. You know, it was before Amazon, it was before recommendations, it was before almost everything that we live in today. But that work at the fundamental layer is what makes much of today's web possible. So we'll continue to do that. We'll also try to do a bunch of new things to move the mission forward. So we've been working on video for, I don't know, 5, 6 years now. The video tag, I think, probably 2004, 2005. And so what we've found, as in so many cases, it's hard to see the possibilities in life. And so one of the reasons leadership distributed globally is really important is because it's the leaders, those of us who are really focused on technology, who can start to see possibilities. As Jonathan described, no one saw a possibility in the browser until Firefox shipped. And when we put Firefox in front of people, suddenly it was possible to see how much better life could be. Boot to Gecko, same thing. Turns out video is the same thing. Most people think video is great because you can watch YouTube. And it's not obvious that what you get is a package that you can consume. You can watch it, but it's not like the web. You can't take a video and connect data. You can't add a bunch of real-time things. You can't take it apart, and you can't run it up. And so that's what we've been changing with video. Most people still don't understand what video could be. That the visual aspects of the web can be as interconnected as text and links. And so we're on the cusp of that. And those efforts, there's a piece of them that shows up in Firefox. There's some other products, Popcorn or Popcorn Maker. Are people familiar with those? No? Okay. So that's a bunch of things. I'll have to look at the program and see if they're on the program. And if they're not, we'll try to add them. These are tools not showing up in Firefox, other Mozilla initiatives to make it easy to work with video on the web and to make video interactive, a sort of hyper video. You know, the web was built on hypertext, but hyper video is possible today. And so there's a lot of work being done in video. And in the tech press, much of the coverage is about the patents and the actual technology in Firefox, but a big effort is to make video as open and exciting and as fun, so that filmmakers can actually make different things with the web, interactive kinds of things. You know, Dan talked about identity. Why do we care about identity? Well, we care about identity because that's me. And if I don't own myself, you know, what do I have? And today, it's another area where people really don't think about identity for its own sake. We think about identity because you want to buy something, or you want an iTunes account, or, you know, but we don't really think about how do I represent myself? Like, where is my home online? And so today you have a bunch of your home online in Facebook, you've got some of it someplace else, but none of it you control. And so the identity piece is not so much to have a competitive product offering, that's the tool, but the identity piece is, if you think about the Mozilla mission, how is a human being at the center of life? Like, if as a person I can't control how I present myself, like where my identity is, how I tell you who I am, and what gets connected to that, then you really don't have much control. And so Dan showed really the very first step in what online identity might be. And we've learned that today, this is a long-term goal of the Mozilla mission. The steps today are small and concrete. I know that your work doesn't seem small, but in the overall picture of how much of me can I control, and how much of my identity is something that I understand and have some control over, those are first steps. We found that it's a hard time to make a complete identity system. Who am I? Who are my friends? You know, all of these things. Because we already have other systems, and it doesn't feel like the right time to launch a whole, complete, different identity system. I guess 7 impossibles might be too much. But that is a long-term goal. And so one of the reasons that we're so focused on persona ID and browser ID and identity is that these are concrete steps that show up in products and that have very clear usefulness today, which are the building blocks of me being able to control my own identity. So one early phase will be with Boot to Gecko and web applications. How do you prove that you bought an application? You know, I used this device, you know, and I bought an application, but when I go to another phone or a tablet or my desktop, how do I prove that I bought that application and I'm entitled to use it on any device? So that's a very product-specific piece of identity. Hi, this is Mitchell at Mozilla.org. I have legitimate access to the following 5 applications. Very concrete, very focused, very product-like, but a step in the long-term goal to say, this is who I am online, and these are the assets I have access to, and this is how I prove that I am myself. And so, some people are really drawn to very concrete, specific product pieces like Dan showed. So if so, go work with Dan and help us understand better whether our systems work well in your environment, whether they should be changed, what would make them better here. If you're the kind of person who's really interested in the long-term, mission-based, who am I, how do I think about myself, what is life like if I'm actually at the center of it, then you can start with a number of us, Dan as well. He's got all of those pictures, but keep in mind that that's the goal that we're aiming for. That from this very specific product piece to the larger mission, how do I stay in control? Another area where we live in both silos and where information about us is rarely under our control is in the social and sharing area. And this is another long-term goal of Mozilla where we don't have specific product plans yet that get us from where we are today to where we think we'd like to be. So where we think we'd like to be is that there is a variety of choices and competition, and that people who choose to live most or all of their life in Facebook are comfortable and happy doing that. For those people who want most of their life in a social network, but some, maybe your health or your government or your personal life, in a setting where you control that kind of information, you can do that. And then for some of us who are really interested in an open alternative to how I share information. I personally would like to have control of my information. I don't actually like it that my photos live in Facebook, and I don't actually like it that all of this information is mediated through Facebook. It's useful and it's convenient, so I like that aspect of it, but I don't like it that it's a forever thing. I'm unusual, right? I've been around, for a long time, and maybe I'm just sort of contrarian. But to me, I'm really uncomfortable with that. So I would like to have some way that I can get the benefits and use Facebook some of the time, but also have simple, easy systems that are attached to me. And right now the options are find a different service that you like better. Put your picture someplace else. But it's not that it's Facebook per se, it's that it's a closed system, and I'm not at the center of it. So in the long run, as we start to build some identity for ourselves that's based on me, not based on a website or a service or a device, then we'll be able to attach ways to share and have social interactions that are really centered around me. And so I think in the next few months you will start to see some experimentations coming out of Mozilla, probably some out of Mozilla Labs on what could social and sharing look like. If you have an interest in that area or you're working on it, I'd go take a look. But I can't say exactly, it's not like Boutique Gecko where we have a product and we know what it's going to look like in the first release, and it's really about getting it done. These are the sort of, a layer of the internet that needs an open Mozilla-like system for us to actually have the kinds of controls and the kinds of choices we're hoping for. Data control, same thing. It extends across a whole range. Just think about all the content that you create online and where it's distributed, whether it's recommendations. All of those things, they don't actually get clustered around you. You go to whatever site you use to provide recommendations about movies or restaurants, and all that data is really scattered someplace else. And so, in the long run, those things are really me. And as we have all of our lives online, some way to pull that information into a silo that is me. So I'm actually in favor of closed silos on the web, provided the silo is me. And your silo should be you. And you should control, is it open, is it closed? I should control what kind of information about me is available to any application whenever it wants it. You know, you want to know this email address, you want to know how to contact me, you want to know where I work, any application in the world. You know, I can make a set of information that is fine, that I never have to be involved in. Any system or app that wants to know that information can just get it. Right? But there's other information I really don't want strangers knowing. And that silo should be me. We don't have that now. You know, we have applications. And so the long-term goal is to say, yep, you know, I exist online and I'm at the center and all of my information and, you know, it revolves around me and you can get access to it. So one of the reasons that the whole web as platform idea is so important is because it enables that. And part of the reason why we're going to the effort of building Kilimanjaro, you know, with the 5 impossibles, I guess, in it, is precisely so we will be able to build the silos of me, or the centers of me, or maybe with open web apps. This one's it's a little bit different. This one is a little more like a tool. The last few, you know, identity, sharing, data, those are long-term goals about how I'm in control, how we might live our lives online. Open web apps may be something more like a tool. For many years, the browser was the way people got online. Really, one client, a browser, was all you needed. Then, in the last few years, we've seen that apps and really small, lightweight ways of getting online are really attractive to people. And that sense of having the icon and I don't know, people like them for a bunch of reasons. And so with open web apps, you know, our goal is to take the things that people love about apps and combine them with the freedom and openness and things that have made the web great. And so that's a pretty serious initiative through the marketplace, and that will take a lot of time and energy and effort. And in a way, it's kind of fun because it's very product specific and we can sort of hunker down and build product and not be so abstract and know that if the product succeeds, we're moving the mission forward. And so there's a very concrete piece to say, we know that this needs to be done. We need an alternative that lives in the app world and that is open. In the long run, maybe that won't be the model. Maybe we don't need app stores. You know, we had a vibrant web before we had app stores and marketplaces. Maybe marketplaces are a point in time, and we'll go back to a different system. Or maybe we'll have many marketplaces, which is, I think, our current best thinking. In the physical world, if you want running shoes, you might go to a department store that has everything and buy them there. Or you might go to a very specialized store that sells athletic shoes, because they're very different. But we don't do that in the online world. We go to the app store. There's only one. And so our thinking right now is that we'll have a Mozilla marketplace, and we will encourage a system which has many different marketplaces, so that, you know, if I like apps and I like a certain kind of game, I can go to your marketplace because I know you like the kind of games that I do, and you will have a marketplace that has good games in it. And if I decide over time, you know, I like something different, I can go to your marketplace because you have something, a way of gathering apps that speaks to me. And so maybe marketplaces are the right metaphor, but we should have many of them. So we'll see. But it's clear what's in front of us, and I really ask you to think about the longer term, because what makes sense in this region or your neighborhood maybe very different from other parts of the world. And the way for us to build what makes sense here is for you to lead us in that direction. Monetization is another new thing that's coming our way. You know, for many years in the early days, the open web was about free software and open source, and everything had to be free, and it wasn't good to make money. And there is still a part of Mozilla that I think that feels that way, particularly among some of our older free software communities. But I think there will be monetization in the system. There already is monetization, and that view about the purity of free software has some conflicts with earning a living, and with developers being able to actually spend their time and feed ourselves and families. So I think monetization is coming. Probably not here quite yet. I'm looking at the marketplace within Mozilla. And so, you know, that'll be really a bit different for us. I don't know if this is, you know, a community of people that has issues about it. If you do, come talk to me. For now, I'm going to go on because I think the sense of being able to earn a living is pretty important. But I'm sure, you know, we'll see some stresses in Mozilla over this, and there'll be some odd discussions about the marketplace and apps, and when we dig into them, we'll find that there's a set of people who are really uncomfortable about having money and making money inside the Mozilla ecosystem. So we'll work through those. And we have all of these things that we're building and ways we're trying to move the Mozilla mission forward. Some are really abstract, but of course we have a bunch of different ways of developing them. I'm going to just go quickly through these because we've talked about them. You know, we have the desktop, which we've been so successful at before. We have, that one's really hard to read, isn't it? What it says is community. Identity, there we go. Thank you, I can't read it as well. And so I think we don't need to talk too much about these. I'm going to put them up here. The last one that I do want to talk about, it says web makers, because we haven't talked about it yet this morning. So this morning's discussions have been very product specific. There's also a set of initiatives at Mozilla that are new in the last year or 18 months that go under the webmaker name. And that's a set of initiatives to bring the open web and involvement and engagement in the open web to people who aren't interested in building Firefox or Boot-to-Gecko or technology. So that's a set of initiatives about how to tell stories, filmmakers, journalists, how to encourage video, like how to help make it clear what kinds of stories can be told. It's a set of programs about encouraging kids to learn to have fun about taking the web apart and putting it back together. And so those are all mechanisms that we'll talk about today but weren't mentioned earlier. And so, you know, come see me or look around under those programs. Those I think will be increasingly important, because the core technology is deep and it's abstract, and you know how hard it is to be involved. You know, in building something like Firefox or Boot-to-Gecko, it has immense leverage, but there are a lot of people interested in the open web who don't want to do that. And so there's a series of programs and initiatives that are just starting and could certainly use a lot of attention if you have the interest in them. Oh, yeah, I'll come back to that one in a minute. Well, so I'll talk about leadership a little bit more. You know, I'm struck still by how much of Mozilla is driven out of California. Right. As I said earlier, I think there's a piece of that that makes sense and would be hard to do anywhere else. But I think we still have too much of Mozilla being driven from one place and one viewpoint. And so there's a huge effort underway. Again, I urge you to be leaders in this and help all, you know, all of us who are working on it do better. One thing that I am planning to do is, with my husband and son next year, is to move to Barcelona and spend some time in a Spanish-speaking place. Break out of the English. I want to spend time away from Mountain View. so that I experience what it's like not to be in the Mountain View office and to work remotely and in different time zones and to try and find ways to communicate and understand what's going on. And also to get some of the long-term leadership of Mozilla out of California and hopefully start a movement of having more leaders in more parts of the world. So that is a way to return to where I started, which is to say, there's nothing like being out and about with the Mozilla community. And if there's any single thing that can be the most important thing, it's the degree to which we all grow and do new things and take some risk. Like certainly those of us who are admit or acknowledge or have come to be comfortable with being leaders in Mozilla didn't know how to do it before. Don't really know, like there's no book on how to lead Mozilla. And so it's always trying to figure things out and taking risk and doing things I don't know how to do. And so the key point to success in the long term is that you do the same. Look up and figure out like what aspect do I really love about Mozilla, where can I be a leader, what can I do? If you're uncomfortable, find somebody who's done it before, but step out and do the stuff that you'll be happy with and proud of over your life. Thanks so much.
You need to stand back because the speakers are right above you. Just for the, when you move too far forward, you'll probably get feedback.
Great. So we're going to get started, and I think if you want to have a different conversation, I have a couple here myself. So.
More in the mouth.
So this is not a required setting at all. I know you're here, you've got food, but if you want to do something else to have a different conversation, feel free. Maybe not in the middle of this one. Well, I had the opposite reaction from Debbie and Mary. I've been sitting all day, and it almost feels like it should be a performance here. But we're going to finish up, and with, I hope, more discussion, sort of interactive session. I really don't want to hear myself too much longer. And I'd love to hear Bruno, who will introduce himself in a moment. But what I would really like to do is see if we can take a little bit of time and figure out what, if anything, Mozilla should be doing about internet policy and legislation. So my thought is just to talk a little bit about where we are. That means really ask you where we are. I'll give a little summary of what Mozilla has done about policy to date, and then see if we can figure out what might make sense going forward to try to do as a group, if anything. So first I'm just going to ask Bruno to introduce himself.
Okay, so I'm Bruno Magretti. I've been a contributor for the last, since 2007, 2008, I think. I also have another life, which is as working in academia as an internet policy activist. That's why I'm here today, so I hope I can do a good discussion.
Okay, so first I'd like to take a quick summary and say, how many of us are living in a country where we feel there's bad regulation governing the internet in the works? How many are looking at like copyright, piracy kinds of legislation? That's what. How about government censorship or reading of email news? That one, that's fewer of us so far. And how many are looking at legislation about other topics related to the internet that's got you concerned? A few. Can you say what it is, what the topic is?
The general tone in Canberra was it's been coming out of Washington, D.C., from a lot of this revolving door politics, like Chris Dodd moving from Washington immediately to the RIA. But I think really it's legislation because I'm not a lawyer, so
Okay.
it just scares the crap out of me.
Legislation in general.
Yep.
Okay. So we know there's copyright, we know there's censorship. What are some other topics? You really have to yell.
I have a like.
Okay. So how many people are engaged in trying to respond? How many people would like to be engaged in responding to these kinds of legislation? Is this something that you're willing or interested to spend time in? That's a few. So that's not... Could you raise your hand once more? So that's a reasonable number. That's it. Okay. How many people have actually been engaged in trying to protest or change or stop legislation? Okay, good. So that's a good bunch of us. And so I think the question for tonight is there something in particular that Mozilla can do? Or something in particular that we could do as a group as Mozilla that would be more effective or that would help in the policy work? And I'm going to ask you to, so I'm going to ask for the set of you who've been actively engaged in doing things, if you can think about what's been effective, what you've done that's actually worked, and what you've done that really hasn't worked, and maybe raise your hand and we'll try and get a microphone to you. And let's see if we can get a little bit of experience about what works with policy, and if that gives us any ideas about what Mozilla might do. And I'm going to tell you now, I don't have answers, so if you're silent, it'll be a short discussion. I have some thoughts, but I'm not here to describe what Mozilla is going to do in a policy sense. I really want to hear what you've been doing, what's working, what's not, and if you've ever had a thought that said, wow, if Mozilla would only do X, we might be more successful. So, does anyone want to
Mitchell?
get started?
That mic is hard. I have a question that might help see that. My sense watching how Mozilla's been involved in American legislation is that and not even just straight up legislation, but policy making, is that we've been pretty effective when legislators have come to us to help educate them, when they said, like, help us understand this issue, you're not the RIA, you're not the NPAA, we don't think you're lobbying us, and so we want that neutral participation, or at least that different participation. And that seems to have moved the needle. I mean, the way the FCC talks about do not track and stuff, it feels like there was as much pull there from them asking us questions as from us banging on the table with a mandate. But you would know much better than I how we ever got to that state, because I don't feel like the Canadian government a little bit, the Canadian privacy commissioner is interested in some of the stuff we do, but I don't have the sense that other world governments, especially a lot of ones that are contemplating this stuff, are knocking on our door to say, hey, help us understand it. And it seems like we're in a better spot with DC constraints though some of the legislation from the other areas. And I just don't know how much of that we did on purpose and build up versus happened to do.
Okay. Well, historically, Mozilla, we've been very conservative about getting involved in legislation or policy. And a lot of that has been me. And I, for many years, was hesitant to get involved in policymaking because it's often very local, and it's every national government at least has its own policies. And so for many years I was afraid that policymaking, if we at Mozilla would do much policymaking, it would be US only, and we would spend immense amounts of time, money, and energy, and be focused only on the United States. And I couldn't see for many years what policies were global enough that Mozilla should get engaged in. And over the last couple of years, we've started to change that very slowly, because it's become clear there are some issues that have a global impact and that relate to the internet. So one thing that happened was that probably I became convinced that there's some really internet issues that affect the overall structure and the way the internet works that we were seeing globally. And then that some of those play out in the United States, and it would be okay to do something in the United States because it has an impact globally. So I made some changes. And then we began to get a set of people who were really working and focused on that. So the organizers of this event, Stacy, are you here? Stacy, we actually have enough resources and mindshare now to have a person who spends tons of time, many hours a week, thinking about privacy in particular, and engagement and privacy in a global sense and user data. So we have some people thinking about that. We started making visits to policymakers in the United States and in the EU. We haven't gotten to this region yet. Why I want to ask Bruno and you about that. But we did start going on and talking to some of the policymakers. It's sometimes in a bit of an educational sense, and sometimes in a very precise legal sense. So we've talked about SOPA and HIPAA and ACTA. And so sometimes we've been well received, and sometimes not. Some are more receptive than others or already have their views. So just to try and summarize, change in my thinking about use of resources and being able to be global, pull from local communities who contact me sometimes on a one-off basis saying, can you help? So try and figure out how to do more of that. And then the overall political pressure about these issues has gone up so much that people will listen to us. And so it's a combination of those. So your suggestion that Mozilla can be effective sort of by educating policymakers, it is something I'd like to discuss and see if that makes sense. Because there's being effective in fighting legislation, no. Then there's effectiveness in trying to educate people why. And I know Gloria was talking about not being so effective No, I don't mean it that way. I mean about not being able to overcome the hurdles in Colombia. I know from the folks from Mexico that there's been a bunch of work there recently. And so please, while I ask Bruno to respond a little bit, give some thoughts about what's been effective and whether you think what Jonathan raised about education with Mozilla name, Mozilla banner, if you might, whether that Mozilla name would make you more effective.
So I guess in the same line of the question that you raised, I think one thing that I wanted to share was that I work for a university in Brazil, so one of the things that we've been doing is actually teaching courses on internet law for judges, which has been tremendously effective. So for instance, it got to a point where in one of the court decisions, the judge actually mentioned the course materials. Not exactly the books on the shelves, but actually the course materials. And they've been very receptive. And what we see many times is that some of the bad court decisions that happen in Brazil and some of the very poorly written legislation there is because policymakers and judges, they don't have the technical expertise. And the only technical expertise they get most of the time are from the folks, either from the lawyers acting the case, but in the policy-making sides, mostly from the lobbies who are trying to push them to pass this very bad legislation. And I think there's a lot of work, sometimes easy work that we can do to stop that. So I'm going to give you one example. So after the whole SOPA thing that was huge, worthwhile, congressman in Brazil, actually, I think it was about the same time that it was being discussed in the US, a congressman introduced a bill which was a literal translation of SOPA. So he introduced this bill in the Brazilian Congress. The thing is, he didn't quite know what that was about. So he did that because some lobbying group who said that they supported him asked him to introduce this legislation, saying that this is a legislation that will deal with copyright issues, that will strengthen copyright protection. He said, okay, I'm going to introduce this. But what happened was that eventually folks found out that was a literal translation of this bill. And congressmen in Brazil, they've been using Twitter a lot, themselves, not their assistant, but themselves. And he started to be quoted on Twitter for folks saying, Congressman John, whatever, introduced SOPA in Brazil. And he didn't want all the bad publicity that SOPA got. So what he did was he pulled out the legislation. So when he realized it, he had no idea what exactly he was proposing. I mean, he didn't know the technical implications of that kind of legislation. So I think going along the lines of actually teaching legislation and providing neutral advice to them on these technical issues would be immensely effective. And as we in Mozilla know so much about the technology side, I think that being able to contribute to the policy debate could be tremendously effective. As I said, sometimes we don't even have to use our Mozilla hats to do that. So I've been working as a Mozilla distributor, but because I care so much about these issues that I think affect freedom on the web, with my other hat, I've been also working with that. I mean, so there's already stuff that we can do right now, but it would be wonderful to see Mozilla doing more of that stuff, I believe, especially in that particular area. So I guess going along that line, so there's another example that I can quote as well. The latest in Colombia, I've seen that a couple of people talked about it, mentioned the legislation in the morning, yes. So it was so for those who don't know, they kind of introduced, they tried to introduce a SOPA sort of legislation in Colombia. They actually introduced it. And it was part of a free trade agreement that the United States had established with Colombia. But the thing was that the whole process of introducing the legislation and getting it approved was really, really fast. I think it was 2 weeks or something. Well, it was 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, they introduced and approved the legislation. So there was no public consultation, there was nothing. And folks were got by surprise. And maybe I would love to hear more from you about the specifics of what happened, but just a general thing that I want to mention is that, so by talking with some of the activists who worked to try to stop that, they said that, so one of the things that they lacked was actually technical expertise. So when they tried to reach out for NGOs in other countries, in the US for instance, to try to check how they could create awareness about that and what was being done elsewhere, like there was not enough time to translate the legislation from Spanish to English in order to get technical advice about that. So, and thinking for this panel, I thought, well, we have a huge community of translators, and that's like another example of a small thing, like something that I think could be very effective in helping in this process of getting technical advice. And I think what would be interesting would be to also hear from you, not only from me, like what are the other things that you've done that worked, or maybe what are the other things that you've seen in your country that require more attention, or on which like that kind of thing happens.
Well, Gloria's my buddy here, so I'm going to ask her. She'll say a little bit about her experience in Honduras.
So, I want to say something. I'm going to say first in Spanish and next in English. Bueno, para todas las personas que están aquí que pertenecen a la comunidad de Mozilla, solamente quería decirles que este tipo de leyes, según lo que entiendo, es un requisito para los tratados de comercio que muchos países latinoamericanos están firmando con los Estados Unidos.